Observe a highly articulate, deeply analytical couple lose access to their conflict resolution skills the moment an argument begins. The human nervous system interprets a relational argument as a threat to survival, activating the exact biological protocols used to evade a physical predator. These high-conflict arguments function as subcortical survival protocols, overriding the prefrontal cortex and dismantling logical thought. To understand exactly what happens in the body during these moments, we can construct a functional map. We call this continuous loop the dysregulation spiral. Synthesizing research from these 5 distinct scientific disciplines translates abstract psychological theories into a functional readout of the nervous system. The spiral initiates with the spark, a micro-expression, a sudden shift in tone, or a brief physical withdrawal triggers an unconscious alarm deep within the body. This forces the surge. The sympathetic nervous system floods the bloodstream with adrenaline, accelerating the heart rate and systematic shutting down the higher-order cognitive functions required for empathy and reason. Next comes the story. Operating in physiological chaos, the brain rapidly invents a narrative, scanning the environment to assign blame and justify the sense of danger it is experiencing. Our objective is to locate the exact neurobiological sequence required to halt this momentum and execute and exit from the spiral. Attempting to resolve relational conflict through verbal negotiation without first regulating the underlying physiology is a biological impossibility. The foundation of this architecture begins with Dr. Stephen Porges and the mechanism of neuroception. The nervous system actively evaluates safety, subconsciously deciding to connect or defend. Heart rate variability indicates this state. When rhythmic oscillation drops, the calming pathway retracts, and the older sympathetic mobilization circuit takes total command of the body's resources. This creates a strict anatomical restriction. The neurological pathways responsible for facial expressivity, empathy, and a prosodic tone of voice are available only in the ventral vagal state. Physiological safety serves as the non-negotiable biological prerequisite for human connection. We observe how this restriction dictates behavior through the work of Peter Levine and Amir Heller. The patterns commonly labeled as anxious or avoidant attachment styles function as trauma-organized survival strategies. The seeker adaptation associated with anxious attachment represents a chronically activated nervous system, scanning for relational threat. Behaviors like rapid texting are activating strategies, biological imperatives designed to compel proximity and force the internal alarm to turn off. The bunker adaptation prioritizes physical and emotional distance, representing a continuously suppressed attachment system. It relies on deactivating strategies. By focusing on flaws or pining for a phantom X, the system actively squelches intimacy to maintain its internal perception of safety. When these 2 distinct nervous systems interact in a partnership, they create a co-regulation loop running in reverse. The seeker's frantic activation and proximity-seeking behavior acts as the precise threat cue that triggers the bunker's deep neurological deactivation. Both bodies are executing evolutionary adaptations designed to survive relational danger. The behavioral data gathered by Dr. John Gottman demonstrates what occurs when these survival adaptations collide. Gottman's research reveals an 81% risk of marital destabilization when a partner escalates conflict rather than accepting influence. The behaviors classified as the 4 horsemen, particularly stonewalling, represent visible markers of sympathetic nervous system overload. When the heart rate crosses that critical threshold, the prefrontal cortex goes fully offline. This leads into the aftermath. The verbal argument has concluded, but the body remains physically mobilized. Leaving a partner isolated in this state carries severe physiological consequences. Dr. Peter Levine observed this mechanism clearly following the 1994 Los Angeles earthquake. Families clustering together in community following the disaster fared better neurologically. This presence of others allowed their nervous systems to complete the somatic survival response. Resolving an argument and then retreating into isolation prevents this completion, leaving the body trapped in a trauma-organized freeze state. The biological exit to the dysregulation spiral requires following a strict 3-step hierarchy known as the sanctuary sequence. Step 1 is recognize. Utilizing Dr. Dan Siegel's research, this represents the moment the prefrontal cortex comes back online to observe the biological chaos within the body. This requires somatic naming. The individual identifies that their body is currently running a historical pattern rather than responding to an immediate physical threat. Step 2 is regulate. Before any verbal negotiation can occur, the individual must execute a vagal restoration protocol to drop heart rate and restore rhythmic variability. Dr. Siegel's research identifies neuroplasticity as the physical mechanism enabling this regulation to become a durable capacity over time. Applying focused attention and deliberately processing emotional arousal builds and thickens these middle prefrontal regulatory fibers. A regulated state, practiced repeatedly, stabilizes into a regulated trait. Without this structural change in the brain's architecture, long-term relationship patterns are biologically primed to repeat. The final step in the sequence is relate. This is the stage where true re-engagement, vulnerability, and complex conflict resolution finally become possible. This stage is biologically inaccessible until the ventral vagus is back online and the muscles of the face and voice regain their expressiveness. This state of physiological readiness allows an emotionally intelligent partner to successfully yield to win. Examining the mechanics of this internal spiral reveals a distinct biological truth. It is a tragic survival paradox. The flooded, defensive body is executing a protocol to protect the very relational connection it is simultaneously destroying. When closeness registers as danger, the nervous system relies on the only primitive, subcortical tools it was ever given. The clinical solution relies on the biological restoration of physiological safety, allowing the nervous system to recognize that it is safe enough to come home.